Live from Washington, this is BBC News. The man mistakenly deported from Maryland to El Salvador returns to the US to face human trafficking charges.
We're here today to announce a major update in an important case. Abrego Garcia has landed in the United States to face justice.
Donald Trump says Elon Musk has, quote, lost his mind as the fallout between the US president and the world's richest man rumbles on. And the BBC investigates a controversial US and Israel-backed aid foundation that says that it has handed out 1 million meals to people in Gaza. I'm Helena Humphrey. Good to have you with us. We begin with a developing story here in the United States. And Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man mistakenly deported from Maryland to El Salvador by the Trump administration, is back in the United States. The news was confirmed by the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi on Friday afternoon. We are expecting him to make his first court appearance any moment in the state of Tennessee, where Mr. Abrego Garcia faces federal charges for allegedly transporting undocumented migrants within the United States. He was deported to El Salvador on the 15th of March, despite a judge's order that granted him protection from deportation on the grounds that he could face persecution by gangs if returned to his home country. Trump administration officials defend his deportation by alleging that Mr. Abrego Garcia was a member of the MS-13 gang, though his lawyers deny that. Now, if convicted of any crimes, the Attorney General said that Mr. Abrego Garcia would serve his sentence in the United States and then be returned to El Salvador. The case has become a flashpoint between the United States' executive and the judicial branch, which has ruled against a number of President Trump's immigration policies.
Our government presented El Salvador with an arrest warrant, and they agreed to return him to our country. We're grateful to President Bukele for agreeing to return him to our country to face these very serious charges. This is what American justice looks like. Upon completion of his sentence, we anticipate he will be returned to his home country of El Salvador.
El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, took to social media repeating unsubstantiated allegations that Mr. Abrego Garcia is a gang member. He posted on X, quote, "I would never smuggle a terrorist into the US. That said, we work with the Trump administration, and if they request the return of a gang member to face charges, of course, we wouldn't refuse." And Chris Van Hollen, the senator for Mr. Abrego Garcia's home state of Maryland, made headlines by visiting El Salvador in search of his missing constituent. He's now released a statement saying, in part, "For months, the Trump administration flouted the Supreme Court and our Constitution. Today, they appear to have finally relented. This is not about the man. It's about his rights and the rights of all. The administration will now have to make its case in the court of law, as it should have all along." Well, joining me now is Lee Gallant, lawyer at the American Civil Liberties Union's national office in New York. Welcome to you, Lee. Always good to have you on the programme. So let's just start with that initial development then. Kilmar Abrego Garcia back in the United States, more than 2 months after the Trump administration admitted that it mistakenly deported him. Your reaction?
Yeah, this is very significant, as you said. I think a couple of things. One is it's a little bit coincidental that all of a sudden, when the Supreme Court has said you must bring him back because he was erroneously deported, bring him back in the normal way, all of a sudden there are charges against him. But I'm going to put that aside because I can't speak to the specific charges about this one individual. I think the larger picture is that it shows the administration has always had the ability to get people out of El Salvador. In our case, involving the use of the Alien Enemies Act, there are at least 130 men sitting there who never had due process, who the judge, in our case, Judge Boasberg, this week said must be brought back. The government must facilitate the return because they didn't have due process. They didn't have a chance to defend themselves. And they're sitting in one of the most notorious prisons in the world, more akin to a gulag than a prison. So I think, the larger takeaway here is that what we've always known, the United States can get people out of El Salvador if it wants. Indeed, we're paying for their detention.
We will touch on what you think the impact will be with regards to other migrants in a moment, but I do want to ask about the process going forward from here. Abrego Garcia's attorney saying that they will keep fighting because they want to make sure that he receives a fair trial here in the United States. Your thoughts on that, what that needs to look like?
Yeah, well, I think it needs to look like the normal criminal process. And so we'll assume that he'll get the normal criminal process and a fair trial in Tennessee until we see otherwise. But as the senator said, the government will now have to prove these charges. They've been insinuating various things on social media, but this is a very different story where they'll have to actually prove the charges in court.
And the administration has said today that if he is found guilty, he would serve his sentence here in the United States, after which he would be deported. Is that satisfactory, legally speaking?
Well, that's often the normal process. I mean, he'll have to have another immigration proceeding after he serves the sentence, but it's not uncommon. If you're convicted in a court of law, you serve the sentence in the United States, and then you often are deported after that. So it's like double punishment, but that is fairly standard in the United States.
And let's touch then on the other migrants who were also on that flight and others who've been on flights since. What do you think this development means for their cases as well, particularly for those who have been deported without due process?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that it reaffirms what the court has already said this week, that those men need to come back. They were removed under what's called the Alien Enemies Act. It's a wartime authority, only been used 3 times in our country's history, all during world wars or the War of 1812. The judge said, look, you can't just send people to a foreign prison without any due process. The United States government needs to facilitate their return. And again, there's at least 100 men there, maybe well more, under the Alien Enemies Act. We're going to see the government has till next week to come up with a plan to facilitate their return. We're going to see how the government handles it. But I think this is just one more piece of confirmation that the United States can get people out of El Salvador if it wants. I think everyone's always known that. But this is just, further confirmation.
But nevertheless, it has taken 2 months in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. So do you think then that we will see these over 100 men, for example, returned to the United States now in light of all the steps that, including you, have taken as part of the ACLU in this case to see one man returned?
Right. So I wish I could say that it's going to happen smoothly and quickly. But I think realistically, given the way this administration has acted, we expect that they're either going to try and stonewall before the district court judge, Judge Boasberg, or they're going to appeal it perhaps all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. So I think we're in for a long fight, but we're prepared for that. These men have now been there 83 days since March 15th. And that's a long time to be in basically a torture prison. So we're going to keep fighting, but we're not expecting the administration just to roll over.
Lee Gallant, lawyer at the American Civil Liberties Union's national office in New York. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
US President Donald Trump is moving on without his one-time advisor Elon Musk after Thursday's explosive fallout between the two men. In a blitz of comments to US media, including to our partner CBS News, President Trump says that he isn't interested in making up with the tech billionaire in their wake of their extraordinary online feud. And Mr. Musk was once an enthusiastic backer of the president, throwing his support behind the Republican nominee during the 2024 election. But in the past week, since leaving his job at the White House, the Tesla and SpaceX CEO began voicing opposition to Mr. Trump's flagship budget bill, which is making its way through Congress. And Mr. Trump brushed off the criticism at first, but the war of words escalated sharply on Thursday, with Mr. Musk taking aim at the president directly across dozens of social media posts. And in another attack, Musk linked President Trump without evidence to the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. On Friday, President Trump highlighted a social media post from one of Mr. Epstein's attorneys, David Schoen, which said, quote, "I was hired to lead Jeffrey Epstein's defense as his criminal lawyer 9 days before he died." He sought my advice 4 months before that, and I can say authoritatively, unequivocally, and definitively that he had no information to hurt President Trump. I specifically asked him. Well, Mr. Musk is also walking back his threat to decommission a space capsule used to take astronauts and supplies to the International Space Station. And his warning to withdraw SpaceX's Dragon capsule came after President Trump threatened to slash Mr. Musk's contracts with the US government. Now, his companies, including Tesla, SpaceX, and Starlink, have direct business ties to the federal government, benefiting from an array of government programs and incentives. Mr. Musk's rocket company, SpaceX, has received tens of billions of dollars from the US government over the last decade, including from the US space agency NASA, as well as the Department of Defense. Well, joining me now live to discuss is Ryan Mac. He is a technology reporter at the New York Times. Ryan, very good to have you with us on this story tonight. So a lot of people were saying they believe that this spat was bound to happen. Those tough words continue, but do you see this argument, this falling out, being resolved in the future at all?
It's hard to say, but in terms of what has been said at this point, I don't see a way back for Elon Musk. He has said some unforgivable things in Trump world, linking Donald Trump to Jeffrey Epstein, for example, saying that Donald Trump wouldn't have won the election without him. These are very stinging barbs, that have crossed the line, and I don't know if there's any way of mending this relationship.
We know that Mr. Trump has threatened to cancel government contracts with Mr. Musk's companies. Do you see that coming to fruition? These two men are closely intertwined, including when it comes to business interests.
I mean, it's certainly a possibility. I mean, both of these men are quite vindictive. Donald Trump has shown a propensity to use whatever means are in front of him to go after his perceived enemies. And so if that means canceling contracts like he has threatened yesterday and he's talked about today, it's all within the realm of possibility. SpaceX is heavily reliant on those U.S. contracts as well. But at the same time, the government is also pretty reliant on SpaceX to get things into space. It's one of the only companies that reliably launches. And so there is, yet, like you said, a reliance there, but it will kind of come down to who blinks first.
Yeah. And on the other side of that, Elon Musk's companies, we even heard reports today that the president is looking at selling his Tesla. What do you think this means for Elon Musk's companies?
Well, it wasn't long ago that Donald Trump was at the White House, shilling Teslas from the White House lawn, saying these cars were great. And it kind of shows that was just all a show, because as soon as this has flipped, he's ready to get rid of those cars. But yeah, I mean, it's not a good look. I think Elon Musk has alienated a lot of potential customers by aligning himself with Donald Trump, and now he's kind of a man without a political home right now, now that he's alienated Donald Trump.
And I wonder what you think with regards to the Silicon Valley billionaires, the founders out there. These are two incredibly powerful men. Ultimately, who do you think they decide to side with here?
I think it'll be dependent on their situation, but a lot of them followed Elon Elon kind of blazed the trail to align themselves with Trump. And now that they're all here, I think they're kind of watching this with a lot of worry, a lot of concern. But for the most part, I think the interests of the tech industry are pretty aligned with what the Trump administration has put forth, especially on things like AI, on competition with China, for example. And I'm assuming that a lot of those tech executives won't want to rock the boat in the way that Elon has very clearly done here.
And Ryan, you said that Elon Musk, for the time being, appears to be somewhat politically homeless. He had put up this survey on X saying, does there need to be a new political party? What do you see Elon Musk, the man, doing now? Does he try to keep a hand in politics, even if it isn't side by side with the Trump administration?
I think he's experienced that power and he's enjoyed it. Being able to influence elections and spend his money and throw his weight around. A couple minutes ago, he actually just tweeted the name of that party. He's going to call it the America Party. He's claiming to have support for it and claiming that, there are people that express interest in having this kind of centrist party or supposed centrist party that he's talking about. But he's relying on a Twitter poll, or a poll on X to make the decision. So, we'll see. I think right now he is, concerned a lot of people. I don't know if a lot of Republicans will side with him at this point. It would take a lot to go back on Donald Trump and to cross Donald Trump. And like I said, he's kind of looking for a political home.
Very interesting insights there from Ryan Mac, technology reporter at the New York Times, joining us from Los Angeles. Good to talk to you, Ryan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News.
China is an extraordinary country, rich in traditions, and I'm back to immerse myself in its stunning landscapes, steeped in natural beauty. I'll uncover the treasures from ancient civilizations.
This is just pure magic.
As I meet some of the remarkable people celebrating the art and culture that reveal the secrets of China's soul.
To understand what this means for the people who live alongside it has been completely extraordinary.
Join me, Alistair Sook, for China's Greatest Treasures on BBC News.
Join Americast as we navigate the biggest news and politics in the US.
With lively chats about what's happening in America
and social media investigations.
Travel to the heart of America.
With Americast, listen wherever you get your BBC podcasts.
We're live with BBC News. Palestinians in Gaza have marked the start of Eid amid renewed Israeli airstrikes. While thousands held prayers outside of destroyed mosques, marking one of Islam's most important holidays. But devastation, as well as food shortages, cast a shadow over the celebrations. Our Sebastian Usher has more now from Jerusalem.
The toll of the war in Gaza as it continues has been made clear once again. Today we have heard from local health officials in Gaza that more than 30 Palestinians were killed in Israeli strikes, but also the Israeli army said that 4 of its soldiers were killed in the southern city of Han Yunis as they were entering a building to check it if there were militants who had established any kind of control centres there. And the army says that it was booby-trapped, it exploded. 4 soldiers were killed, 5 others were wounded. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described it as a sad and a difficult day, but said that they'd given their lives, they'd sacrificed their lives for the safety of everyone in Israel. We've also seen the aid issues continue for the Palestinians, still a desperate situation. This new aid mechanism, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. There was some confusion earlier in the day whether it was going to open 2 of the sites that were open on Thursday. They did open, but we heard from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation later that they closed earlier than they were meaning to because they said there was overcrowding and it was unsafe to continue. So about a third of the food that it had delivered the previous day was given to Palestinians. So there's still big questions over that mechanism. There was also a warning from the Israeli army to Palestinians who might be heading towards an aid distribution centre, telling them that they should only do that essentially in the hours when there is light, so from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening, and that any other time that they're moving, they're heading towards any of those centres, it should be regarded as too dangerous to do so. That raises big questions over how Palestinians will be able to make their way to these distribution centres if they're going to open up early in the morning. We've seen tens of thousands of people go because there are so few of these sites. Just 2 of them were open today, 2 of them yesterday. So naturally, Palestinians, some of them from quite long distances, are making that trek towards the site. It seems almost impossible that they would be able to do it in those hours between 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening, unless the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is able to time the opening of their site to such an extent that it works for people to be able to come and to be able to get as much of the supplies as they can in a way that avoids the scenes that we had earlier in the week for 3 days when many were killed or were wounded, eyewitnesses saying that they were shot by Israeli troops. Obviously, the Israeli army and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation are hoping there won't be a repeat of that, although neither have accepted most of those accounts, saying that most of them are fabrications by Hamas, although the Israeli army did concede that its troops did open, at least at one point, on what they saw as suspects as they were approaching them in a threatening manner.
Sebastian Usher reporting there. Well, the controversial US and Israeli-backed group at the centre of handing out aid from Israeli military-secured hubs in Gaza says that the equivalent of 8 million meals have been handed out to people since it began operations last week. Now, the US-Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has been heavily criticised by the UN for politicising aid, and as Tom Bateman reports, what we actually know about the organisation largely remains a mystery.
The future of Gaza currently rests in rural America. The foundation supposed to feed its population was registered here 2 weeks after Donald Trump took office. I went to try and find it.
For the rooms, the candles, and the firewood that we used.
A quaint town as distanced as it gets from Gaza's trauma. The foundation was an American-Israeli idea meant to cut out the UN as the major food supplier to Palestinians, but critics see it as entrenching Israeli control over Gaza, militarizing aid. So this building is where the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is registered. It's its registered address, but inside here is actually a registration agent. So the foundation doesn't actually exist here at all. I asked some questions to the agents here. They gave me the numbers of their lawyers and said I should talk to them for more details. And when I asked why the foundation might register here but not be here, they said, well, it's because they don't want to be bothered. We got hold of the group's registration papers, naming an unknown attorney as its president and crucially revealing nothing about who funds it.
If you were interested in helping suffering people, you'd let the UN do their job.
The UN Agency for Palestinians is highly critical of the new project.
I cannot fathom, as a UN employee or even as an American, how the world can accept this circumstance, how the world can say 4 places in Gaza designed to pen people into a small area with a Hunger Games distribution network is acceptable.
They say, of course, this is about denying aid falling into the hands of Hamas.
This is just a made-up excuse in order to create a system that looks like it's helping people without actually helping people.
The foundation says it's handed out millions of meals, but it's been steeped in controversy. Dozens of people were killed this week making their way to one of its sites, with the Israeli military investigating accounts many were shot by its forces. I've been in touch with the foundation's new spokesman, but they're still declining interview requests and haven't answered many of our questions.
Call has been forwarded to voicemail.
We are committed to building a great wall of Christian Zionism all over the world.
This man, Reverend Johnny Moore, has now been named the foundation's chairman. He's a pro-Israel Christian evangelical preacher and PR executive who was among a group who prayed for Donald Trump in the Oval Office. In an article for Fox News, he called this a week of success for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, attacking pearl-clutching activist humanitarians and claiming, without evidence, the established aid system was corrupt. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation press released pictures of Palestinians thanking President Trump. But the main ingredients of this aid are its politics, from a group opponents say is shrouded in secrecy, weaponizing food and shutting out those who could get to the most needy in Gaza. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Delaware.
President Trump says that his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping has agreed to restart the flow of rare earth minerals and magnets from China, and that the two are very far advanced when it comes to a trade deal. Now, he was speaking on board Air Force One on Friday. It comes as trade representatives of the two countries get ready for talks to take place in London on Monday. President Trump initially ordered tariffs of 145% on some items from China, but under a truce that was struck in May, the US lowered those import taxes on Beijing to 30% to allow for talks. And finally, a new study has found that cutting off a rhino's horn is the most effective and economical method of deterring poachers. A conservation assessment in South Africa found that removing the horn under sedation, which doesn't harm the animal, reduced poaching by nearly 80% between 2017 and 2023. Now, rhinos are at significant threat of extinction, and it's the material in their horns which puts them at risk, which is commonly used for traditional medicine in China, Vietnam and other Asian countries. We are watching BBC News. Remember, for the very latest, you can always go to our website, that is bbcnews.com. You've got the latest there, including the live blog on the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and we'll have more on that story at the top of the hour. So do join me then if you can. Bye for now.
Hello, mixed weather prospects across Europe as we head into the weekend. Across southern parts, it is looking largely dry and quite hot, but further north, low pressure is in charge. Various frontal zones sliding eastwards with some showers and some thunderstorms. This cluster of showers here could be particularly potent as it moves from parts of Switzerland, the Alps, up towards, say, Poland and Belarus. Could see some quite vicious thunderstorms here through Saturday afternoon with large hail, squally gusty winds. Further south and east, Nicosia getting up to around 36 degrees, 34 in Athens. Quite hot across the Balkans and Italy, 33 in Rome. And we will also see heat building across Spain and Portugal, 32 in Madrid on Saturday. And then come further north, we've got blustery weather and some very heavy showers and some thunderstorms. As we look ahead to Sunday, well, this zone of showers and storms, if anything, moves a little bit further eastwards. Could see some particularly intense thunderstorms through parts of Germany into the western side of Poland. Further south, yes, it is dry, sunny and hot, 34 in Madrid. Parts of southern Spain, I think, will get to around 40 degrees Celsius. You can see that in the forecast there for Seville. It will eventually cool off as we head through into the middle part of the coming week. At the same time, Paris and London will be warming up. Elsewhere in Zagreb, some of the very high temperatures will be easing away, but Athens sees lots of hot sunshine.
This programme asks plain questions with the help of the unrivalled range of BBC journalists right across the world. And gathered here in this building, I'll also draw on my frontline experience that helps me know who to talk to and who to listen to. Meaning our analysis is objective, unbiased, and I promise you, with absolutely no spin. That's why we call our programme Unspun World.
On BBC News.
As some of the UK's biggest retailers are hit by cyber attacks, should a company ever pay a ransom to the hackers? Many do, despite the advice not to. So I'll talk to one of the country's biggest cybersecurity chiefs and a ransom negotiator. Join us this week on Talking Business here on BBC News.
Global business news from the boardroom or grassroots, BBC News cuts through the jargon to add colour, depth and context. With live reaction from Wall Street and Asia, studio interviews with top CEOs and the latest innovations in technology. Talking Business.
Hello and welcome to Talking Business. Here's what's on the programme this week. A data hack causes months of chaos at one of Britain's biggest and most iconic retailers, Marks & Spencer. So, should you ever pay a ransom if hackers get into your business systems?
I always say to people, you haven't got a good decision. You've got two bad options and you have to decide which is the least bad option to go for.
Official guidance is not to pay the cyber attackers, but many companies do. So how can you be prepared if hackers get in and demand your money or threaten some big data damage? We'll hear what it's like inside a negotiation from someone who spent years doing deals on behalf of victims. And I'll be talking to Kieran Martin, the man in charge at the UK's new Cyber Monitoring Centre. He also set up and ran the country's National Cyber Security Centre. And later in the show, another big